Michael DeSanta survived the Oakland Hills Fire, the Cedar Fire, and the Thomas Fire. He was supposed to retire in 3 months when the Redwood Inferno erupted in 2016. But during his final mission, he simply vanished into the smoke. 8 years later. Before we begin, make sure to like the video and subscribe for more stories like this one. When a hiker found his emergency kit, she also found a recording device inside. And what she heard on that recording would reveal that the deadliest fire in California history wasn't an accident, it was murder. The morning of August 15, 2016, started like any other at Station 19 in Riverside County, California. Michael DeSanta was cleaning his gear when the alarm pierced through the station. Red lights flashed as the automated voice announced, "Structure fire, Redwood National Forest. Multiple structures involved. Wind speed 45 meters. Extreme fire danger." Michael had heard that announcement thousands of times in his 23-year career, but something felt different this morning. Maybe it was the retirement papers sitting on his kitchen table at home, signed and ready to submit. Maybe it was the dream he'd had the night before, flames chasing him through an endless corridor with no exit. Captain Rodriguez gathered the crew in the bay. "This one's going to be rough, people. We've got a fast-moving fire that started near the old lumber mill. Winds pushing it toward the residential area. DeSanta, you're taking Engine 19 with Martinez and Thompson. I want you on the eastern flank." Michael nodded, pulling on his turnout gear with practiced efficiency. At 54, his movements weren't as quick as the younger guys, but they were precise. Every strap, every buckle, every piece of equipment had its place and purpose. "Hey, old man," called out Jake Martinez, his partner for the past 5 years. "You sure you're up for this? Retirement's looking pretty good right about now, isn't it?" Michael managed a smile. 3 more months, Jake. 3 more months and I'm done with all this." But as they climbed into Engine 19, Michael felt an overwhelming sense of unease. He'd never been superstitious, but veteran firefighters learned to trust their instincts. Something was wrong. Very wrong. The drive to the fire took 25 minutes, and with each mile, the smoke grew thicker. By the time they reached the incident command post, the sky had turned an ominous orange-black. The fire was already consuming hundreds of acres, moving faster than anyone had predicted. Incident Commander Barnes briefed the teams. "We've got multiple spot fires starting ahead of the main blaze. Looks like embercast is happening faster than our models predicted. I need Engine 19 to establish a defensive perimeter on Sector 7. There's a residential area about 2 miles east that we need to protect." Michael studied the tactical map, noting the terrain, wind direction, and escape routes. It was standard protocol, but something nagged at him. The fire's pattern didn't look natural. Spot fires usually occurred randomly, but these seemed almost deliberately placed. "Sir," Michael raised his hand. "These spot fires, the pattern seems unusual. Have we ruled out arson?" Barnes frowned. "We're focused on suppression right now, DeSanta. Arson investigation comes later." But Michael's concern deepened as they drove toward their assigned sector. In his experience, wildfires had a chaotic randomness to them. This fire moved with what seemed like purpose, as if someone who understood fire behavior had planned its spread. Engine 19 reached Sector 7 at 2:15 p.m. The residential area they were protecting consisted of about 30 homes scattered along Mountain View Road. Most residents had already evacuated, but a few stragglers remained, stubbornly refusing to leave their properties. Michael's team began establishing a waterline when his radio crackled. "Engine 19, we've got reports of civilians trapped in a residence at 1247 Mountain View Road. Elderly couple refused to evacuate. Can you respond?" "Copy that. Dispatch. Engine 19 responding to 1247 Mountain View Road." Jake looked at Michael with concern. "That's directly in the fire's path. If we go in there, we might not make it out." Michael was already suiting up. 23 years, Jake. I've never left anyone behind. Not starting now." They loaded their equipment and headed toward the address. The house sat at the end of a long dirt road, surrounded by tall pines that were already smoldering. Smoke was so thick they could barely see 10 feet ahead. As they approached the house, Michael's radio crackled again. But this time, the voice wasn't from dispatch. It was Captain Rodriguez, and he sounded panicked. All units, a problem. The fire has jumped the containment line in multiple locations. This wasn't wind-driven spread. Someone is setting new fires behind our lines. Michael felt his blood run cold. His worst fears were being confirmed. This wasn't a natural wildfire. Someone was actively working against their suppression efforts. Engine 19, abort your current mission and return to command post immediately, Rodriguez continued. But Michael could see the house now. An elderly man was standing on the porch, waving desperately. His wife was visible in the window, apparently unable to walk. Jake, take the engine back to command. I'm going in for these people. Michael, you heard the captain. We need to go. I'm not leaving them to die. Go back and tell Rodriguez I'll radio when I have the civilians. Jake reluctantly drove away, leaving Michael alone with his equipment. He approached the house, fighting through smoke that burned his eyes even through his mask. The elderly man, probably in his 80s, hobbled toward him. Thank God you came. My wife, she can't walk. Her hip replacement surgery was last month. Michael helped the man while assessing the situation. The fire was close, maybe 10 minutes away. He could hear it crackling through the trees, an ominous sound he'd learned to respect over the years. Inside the house, he found the elderly woman sitting in a wheelchair, alert but clearly frightened. I'm Michael DeSanta, Riverside Fire Department. We're going to get you both out of here. But as he was helping her into the wheelchair, Michael heard something that made him freeze. Footsteps, heavy boots on the wooden porch. But Jake had left, and no other engines were in the area. The front door opened, and Michael expected to see another firefighter. Instead, a man in civilian clothes entered, carrying what looked like an incendiary device. Well, Michael the hero firefighter. Michael didn't recognize the man, but something about his voice was familiar. Who are you? This area is under evacuation. The man smiled, and Michael noticed he had soot on his hands and clothes. I'm the guy who's been keeping you busy all day. Did you really think this fire was an accident? Michael's hand moved slowly toward his radio. You're the arsonist. Arsonist? That's such a negative word. I prefer fire management specialist. You see, Michael, some fires need to happen. Some secrets need to burn. The elderly couple huddled together, terrified. Michael stepped between them and the stranger. Whatever you're planning, these people are innocent. Let me get them out, and then we can talk. Oh, we're way past talking. You see, you've always been too observant for your own good. Remember the Riverside warehouse fire 3 years ago? You kept asking questions about how it started. Then the Henderson shopping center fire last year. More questions. Michael did. Remember, both fires had seemed suspicious to him, but his reports had been dismissed. Those were insurance fraud cases? Among other things. But you couldn't let it go, could you? Always the thorough investigator. Always the hero. Well, heroes don't live long in my line of work. The man began assembling what Michael now recognized as a sophisticated incendiary device. Military grade. Not something a typical arsonist would have access to. You're not working alone, Michael realized. This is organized. How many people are involved? Enough to make sure this conversation never happened. Michael activated his emergency beacon discreetly, hoping someone would notice if he went silent. Why kill innocent people? Why not just come after me directly? Because accidents happen in fires, Michael. Heroes die trying to save civilians. Very tragic. Very believable. The man finished assembling his device and placed it near the house's main support beam. Timer's set for 8 minutes. Enough time for me to get clear, not enough time for anyone to reach you. As he headed for the door, the man turned back. Oh, and Michael, that retirement you were planning. Consider it permanent. Michael watched the arsonist disappear into the smoke, his mind racing. 8 minutes to evacuate 2 elderly people who couldn't move quickly through terrain he couldn't see, with a fire bearing down on them. But Michael DeSanta hadn't survived 23 years by giving up when things looked impossible. He quickly assessed his options. The main road was blocked by fire, but he remembered seeing an old logging trail during their approach. It might provide an escape route if it wasn't completely overgrown. Listen to me, he told the elderly couple. My name is Michael, and I need you to trust me completely. We're going to go out the back way, and I'm going to carry you both if necessary. The old man nodded grimly. Whatever you say, son. I'm Harold. This is my wife, Betty. Michael helped Betty into a fireman's carry position, while Harold leaned on him for support. Hey. Made their way to the back door, Michael checking his watch. 6 minutes. Outside, the smoke was so thick he could barely breathe even with his mask. Harold was struggling, coughing violently. Betty remained conscious but was clearly in pain. From her recent surgery, Michael activated his radio. Mayday, Mayday. Engine 19, Santa reporting. I have 2 civilians at 1247 Mountain View Road. House is rigged with incendiary device. Detonation in approximately 5 minutes. Requesting immediate backup and medical. Static answered him. Either his radio was malfunctioning or something was jamming the signal. They reached the logging trail, but Michael's heart sank. It was partially blocked by fallen trees, and the fire had already jumped to this side. They were surrounded. 4 minutes. Harold, I need you to listen carefully. There's a creek about 200 yards down this trail. I'm going to carry Betty there first, then come back for you. Get under that metal shed and stay low. Son, you don't have time for 2 trips. I'm not leaving either of you. Michael lifted Betty and began running down the trail, dodging burning branches and jumping over obstacles. His 54-year-old body protested, but adrenaline kept him moving. He reached the creek and gently set Betty down in the shallow water. Stay here. Stay in the water. I'll be right back. He sprinted back toward Harold, but as he approached the shed, he heard the sound he'd been dreading. The whoosh of an accelerated fire. The incendiary device had activated early. The house exploded in a ball of flame that knocked Michael to the ground. The blast was enormous, far larger than any natural fire would create. When he got back to his feet, Harold was nowhere to be seen. Harold! Harold! Michael searched frantically. The entire area was now engulfed. Then he heard a weak voice from under the collapsed shed. Here, son. I'm here. Harold was trapped under a beam, conscious but bleeding. Michael used his equipment to leverage the beam up just enough to pull the old man free. Harold's leg was clearly broken. 2 minutes to get both civilians to safety. Michael made a decision that went against every regulation in the book. He radioed on an emergency frequency that bypassed normal channels. Any unit. This day. Santa, badge number 4419. I have urgent information about arson in the Redwood Fire. Multiple incendiary devices. Organized operation. If anyone receives this transmission, the arsonist is on site and armed. He helped Harold to the creek where Betty waited. The water was cold, but it was their only protection from the advancing flames. Michael, Harold gasped. That man who came to the house. I recognized him. Who was he? Works for the county. Seen him at the municipal building. Planning department, I think. Michael's mind raced. County planning department would have access to all the development maps, would know exactly which properties needed to be cleared for new construction. Insurance fires were one thing, but this was something much larger. The fire roared around. Them now. But the creek provided a small sanctuary. Michael activated his personal recording device, something he always carried in case he needed to document safety violations or equipment failures. This is Michael DeSanta, badge 4419, August 15th, 2016, approximately 3:30 p.m. I've just encountered a man at 1247 Mountain View Road who admitted to setting the Redwood Fire. He indicated this was part of a larger operation, possibly involving County Planning Department. The fire was not accidental. Multiple incendiary devices being used. If something happens to me, this recording should go to State Fire Marshal's office. He paused, hearing voices in the distance. But these weren't rescue voices. They sounded angry, organized. Harold, Betty, I need you both to stay very quiet. I think there are more of them. Through the smoke, Michael could see flashlight beams and hear radio chatter, but it wasn't on fire department frequencies. These were different radios, possibly military or law enforcement grade. Sweep sector by sector, a voice commanded. He couldn't have gotten far with 2 civilians. What about the house? Burned completely. If they were inside, there won't be anything left to find. Michael realized they were hunting for survivors. This wasn't a rescue operation. It was a cleanup operation. Michael crouched in the creek, with Harold and Betty, listening to the search teams getting closer. The voices belonged to at least 4 different men, and they were conducting a systematic search of the area. "Check the creek line," one voice ordered. If anyone survived the blast, they'd head for water. Michael had to make a decision. The elderly couple couldn't move quickly or quietly. If he stayed with them, all 3 would likely be captured or killed. But if he created a distraction, "Harold," he whispered, "I need you to listen very carefully. Take Betty and follow this creek downstream about half a mile. There's an old ranger station. You'll see a wooden bridge. Get under that bridge and stay there until morning. Don't come out for anyone except official fire department or police. What about you? I'm going to lead them away from you." Michael handed Harold his spare radio. "If you don't hear from me by sunrise, use this to call for help. Tell them everything we've seen." He also gave Harold his personal recording device. "This is insurance. If something happens to me, get this to the media." Before Harold could protest, Michael slipped out of the creek and began moving loudly through the underbrush, deliberately breaking branches and making noise to draw attention away from the elderly couple. "Contact. I've got movement northeast of the burn site." Flashlight beams swung toward Michael's position. He had about a 30-second head start before they reached him. Using his knowledge of the terrain, he began leading them on a chase through the burned forest. But Michael quickly realized these weren't amateurs. They moved with military precision, communicating with hand signals when they got close. These were professionals. He climbed a rocky outcropping, hoping to get a better view of his pursuers. What he saw made his blood run cold. 6 men in tactical gear, armed with automatic weapons. This wasn't just arson. This was a paramilitary operation. Michael activated his radio one more time. Any station. This is Dis 4419. Armed suspects in Sector 7. Military-style weapons. This is not a wildfire suppression issue. Request immediate law enforcement backup." A voice answered, but it wasn't dispatch. "Michael DeSanta, this is Colonel Patterson. Put down your radio and come out with your hands visible." Michael recognized the voice. Colonel James Patterson, Riverside County Emergency Management. He'd worked with Patterson on several large fires over the years. A decorated military veteran who'd transitioned to civilian emergency services. "Colonel Patterson." "Sir, we have armed suspects in the fire zone. I need backup immediately." "No, Michael, you need to surrender immediately. You've stumbled into something much larger than you understand." The pieces began falling into place. Emergency management would have the authority to coordinate multiple agencies, access to military equipment, and the ability to control information flow during a crisis. "How long has this been going on?" Michael asked. "Years. Do you have any idea how much money is tied up in undevelopable land, environmental regulations, endangered species protection, historical preservation, all of it preventing legitimate development? Sometimes nature needs a little help clearing the way." Michael moved carefully along the ridge, trying to put distance between himself and the search teams below. "So you burn out property owners and buy the land cheap? It's more complex than that. We're talking about billions in development potential. Housing projects, shopping centers, industrial facilities, all blocked by environmental red tape. A few strategic fires solve multiple problems. And if people die, acceptable casualties for the greater economic good. Do you know how many jobs these developments will create? How much tax revenue?" Michael felt sick. This wasn't just insurance, fraud. It was economic terrorism disguised as natural disaster. The other fires, Henderson Shopping Center, Riverside Warehouse, those were yours too. Proof of concept. Small-scale operations to test our methods and refine our techniques. This is our first major implementation. Michael reached a cliff overlooking the valley. Behind him, he could hear the search teams closing in. Below him was a 200-foot drop into another creek. Not survivable. "Michael, you have nowhere to go. Come down and we can work something out. Pension benefits, relocation assistance. You could disappear very comfortably. And if I refuse, then you become another casualty of the Redwood Inferno. Heroic firefighter dies trying to save civilians. Very tragic. Your family will receive full benefits." Michael looked at his options. The search teams were now visible. about 100 yards away and closing. The cliff behind him offered no escape, but there was one thing they hadn't considered. He'd been carrying a full water pack and emergency shelter, standard equipment for extended operations. If he could reach the creek below without dying on impact. Colonel, I have one question. How many people in the department know about this? Need. To no basis. Captain Rodriguez is clean. He thinks this is a natural fire. Most of your crew is clean, but enough people in key positions to make this work. And after today, we'll recruit selectively. People who understand that sometimes you have to break a few rules to serve the greater good. Michael made his decision. He activated his emergency beacon one final time, hoping it would help someone find his body and the evidence he'd gathered. Colonel Patterson, I've been a firefighter for 23 years. I've risked my life to save others thousands of times. I'm not going to become part of your conspiracy now. Michael, don't be stupid. Think about your family. Think about your pension. But Michael was already moving. He deployed his emergency shelter as a makeshift parachute and leapt from the cliff. The fall felt like an eternity. Michael's improvised parachute caught air, slowing his descent, but not nearly enough. He aimed for the deepest part of the creek, praying the water would be deep enough to break his fall. He hit the water hard, the impact driving all air from his lungs. The creek was deeper than expected, probably 8 feet, but the rocky bottom still hammered his back and legs. Pain shot through his body as he struggled to surface. Above him, flashlight beams swept the cliff edge. He heard shouting, but couldn't make out the words over the ringing in his ears. Did you see him land? Negative. That's a 200-foot drop into rocks. Nobody survives that. Confirm the body. Negative. Too dangerous to rappel down in these conditions. We'll search the area at first light. Michael forced himself to remain motionless in the water, despite the cold and pain. His left leg felt wrong, possibly broken. His shoulder was dislocated, but he was alive. After what felt like hours, the voices faded. Michael dragged himself onto the muddy creek bank, taking inventory of his injuries. Definitely a broken leg, dislocated shoulder, probably cracked ribs, and various cuts and bruises, but nothing immediately life-threatening. His radio was destroyed, but his recording device was still intact in its waterproof case. His emergency beacon was damaged, but might still be transmitting. Michael found a sheltered spot under an overhang and began treating his injuries as best he could. His field medical training was limited, but he managed to reset his shoulder and fashion a splint for his leg, using branches and medical tape from his kit. As dawn approached, Michael faced a grim reality. He was injured, alone, and presumed dead. The men hunting him controlled county emergency services and had military-grade equipment. Going back would likely mean death, but Harold and Betty were still out there. If they'd survived the night, they would need help, and someone had to expose Patterson's conspiracy. Michael began crawling downstream, following the creek toward where he'd told the elderly couple to hide. Every movement sent waves of pain through his body, but he forced himself to continue. It took him nearly 2 hours to travel what should have been a 30-minute walk. When he finally reached the wooden bridge, he called out softly, "Harold? Betty? It's Michael." A weak voice answered from under the bridge. "Michael? Thank God. We thought you were dead." Harold and Betty had survived the night, though Betty was showing signs of hypothermia and Harold's leg was badly infected. They needed medical attention immediately. "We have to get you to a hospital," Michael said. "What about those men? Are they still looking?" "They think I'm dead, but we need to be careful about who we trust." Michael helped the couple out from under the bridge. Betty was barely conscious, and Harold was running a fever. Using his survival skills, Michael built a travois to carry Betty and helped Harold lean on him for support. They began making their way toward the nearest road, moving slowly to avoid detection. Michael's plan was to get them to a hospital, then find a way to contact the media or federal authorities who weren't connected to Patterson's operation. But as they reached the edge of the forest, Michael heard the sound that chilled his blood. Helicopters, multiple aircraft, conducting a search pattern. "They're still looking," he told Harold. "Change of plans. We need to stay hidden until I can figure out who to trust." They took shelter in an abandoned hunting cabin Michael remembered from previous fires. The structure was old but solid, with a well and basic supplies. More importantly, it was off any official maps and hidden by dense tree cover. Over the next few days, Michael cared for Harold and Betty while monitoring radio traffic on a battery-powered emergency radio he found in the cabin. The news reports told a very different story than what had actually happened. Veteran firefighter Michael DeSanta died heroically attempting to rescue civilians during the Redwood Inferno. His body was not recovered due to the intense heat and structural collapse. DeSanta, 54, was scheduled to retire in 3 months. According to the media, the fire was being investigated as a possible arson case, with a suspect described as a drifter who'd been seen in the area before the fire started. No mention of organized conspiracy or county officials. Michael realized that Patterson's people controlled the narrative completely. Any evidence he might provide would be dismissed as the ramblings of a supposedly dead man suffering from trauma, but he still had his recording device, and he had Harold and Betty as witnesses. On the 4th day, Harold's condition worsened dramatically. The infection in his leg was spreading, and he needed antibiotics immediately. Michael faced an impossible choice: reveal their location to get Harold medical help or watch him die. "Michael," Harold whispered, "I need you to listen to me. Betty and I, we're old. We've lived our lives, but you have to expose what happened. Promise me. You're not going to die, Harold. I'm getting you help." That man at the house, I remembered more about him. His name is David Walsh. I've seen him at county planning meetings. He's the deputy director. Michael filed this information away. Walsh and Patterson. How many others were involved? Betty suddenly gripped Michael's hand. Despite her illness, her eyes were alert. "Michael, I was a court reporter for 30 years. I know how to document evidence. When we get out of this, I'll help you. I'll testify to what we saw." Michael squeezed her hand. "We're all getting out of this." But he knew their situation was desperate. Harold needed medical attention immediately, and they couldn't hide forever. Michael had to take a risk. He decided to contact someone he'd known for years, someone he was reasonably certain wasn't connected to Patterson's operation. Fire Marshal Jennifer Chen, a state-level investigator who'd worked several cases with Michael. Using the cabin's old landline phone, amazingly, it still worked. Michael called Chen's direct number. "Chen, Jennifer, this is Michael DeSanta. Don't hang up and don't tell anyone about this call." Silence. Then, "Michael, you're supposed to be dead. The whole department attended your memorial service yesterday. I'm very much alive. And I have information about the Redwood Fire that's going to blow this case wide open." Jennifer Chen agreed to meet Michael at the abandoned cabin, but insisted on bringing backup. "I believe you, Michael, but what you're describing sounds like a massive conspiracy. I need witnesses and documentation." She arrived 3 hours later with State Police Detective Maria Santos and a paramedic team. Harold was immediately airlifted to a hospital in Sacramento, while Betty was treated at the scene for exposure and dehydration. "Before we do anything else," Jennifer said, "I need to hear everything from the beginning." Michael played his recording device, watching their faces change as they heard Patterson's confession. Then Harold and Betty provided their statements, describing the arsonist at their house and the subsequent events. "This is incredible," Detective Santos said. "But we're going to need more than one recording and 2 elderly witnesses to bring down a county emergency management director." "What do you need?" "Documentation, financial records, communication logs, evidence of the conspiracy that can be independently verified." Jennifer nodded. "And we need to move fast. If Patterson realizes you're still alive, he'll destroy evidence and possibly eliminate witnesses." They developed a plan. Michael would officially remain dead, while Jennifer and Detective Santos conducted a covert investigation. Betty would be relocated to a safe house, and Harold would be guarded at the hospital. "The problem," Jennifer explained, "is that Patterson has legitimate authority during emergency situations. He can restrict access to investigation sites, control information flow, even redirect resources. We need federal involvement to override his local authority." Over the next week, working from a safe house, they built their case methodically. Detective Santos used her contacts to access financial records for Walsh and Patterson. Jennifer coordinated with federal fire investigators who weren't connected to local agencies. What they discovered was staggering. The conspiracy went back 5 years and involved at least 12 people in various county departments. They'd identified over 30 properties targeted for development fires, with a combined potential value of over $2 billion. The operation was sophisticated, using legitimate emergency management resources to coordinate arson activities. They'd even established shell companies to purchase burned properties at reduced prices, then develop them once environmental restrictions were removed. "Look at this," Detective Santos showed Michael a financial document. Walsh's personal account shows deposits totaling $1.2 million over the past 2 years, all from shell companies connected to development projects on previously burned land. Jennifer had discovered something even more disturbing. The Redwood Fire wasn't their first attempt at this scale. Remember the Cascade Mountain fire 3 years ago? Officially caused by illegal camping, but the burn pattern was wrong. And guess who was emergency coordinator for that incident? Patterson. Exactly. And look at what's been built on that land since then. 3 shopping centers, 2 housing developments, and an industrial park. Michael felt sick. How many people had died in fires that weren't accidents? How many families had lost everything so these people could profit? "We have enough for arrests," Detective Santos said. "But we need to move simultaneously. If we arrest one person, the others will be warned." They coordinated with the FBI, since the conspiracy crossed state lines and involved federal land. The takedown was scheduled for the following morning, with simultaneous arrests at multiple locations. But that evening, Michael received a call that changed everything. Michael DeSanta. He didn't recognize the voice. "Who is this?" "My name is Rebecca Walsh. David Walsh is my brother." Michael's blood ran cold. "Walsh was one of the main conspirators. I need to meet with you immediately. David doesn't know I'm calling, but I have information that could save lives." Against Jennifer's advice, Michael agreed to meet Rebecca at a 24-hour diner outside Sacramento. She was waiting in a corner booth, a woman in her 40s with stress lines around her eyes. "David told me you were dead," she said immediately. "When I saw you walk in, I almost had a heart attack." "What information do you have?" "David's been acting strange for months. Paranoid, secretive. Last week, I found documents in his home office. Plans for something called Operation Clear Cut." She slid a folder across the table. Inside were maps, target lists, and operational timelines. Michael's hands shook as he read. "They're planning to burn the entire northern section of the national forest," he said. "This isn't just about development. This is about creating a massive, ecological disaster." "There's more. Look at the timeline." Michael found the page she referenced. The operation was scheduled to begin in 72 hours, targeting over 100,000 acres of protected forest land. The plan called for coordinated arson attacks at 12 different locations, timed to create an unstoppable fire complex. "Why are you showing me this?" Rebecca's eyes filled with tears. "Because David used to be a good person. Our father died fighting fires in Montana. David became an environmentalist because of that. Somewhere along the way, money corrupted him. But this is genocide against the forest. Rebecca, we need these documents as evidence. Are you willing to testify against your brother? If it stops this madness, yes." Michael immediately called Jennifer. "We need to move tonight. They're planning something much bigger than we realized." The FBI operation began at 4 a.m., with simultaneous raids on 12 locations. Michael watched from a surveillance van as agents arrested Colonel Patterson at his home. The man who'd orchestrated years of arson and murder was taken into custody wearing pajamas. His confident demeanor finally cracked. Walsh was arrested at his office, where agents found additional evidence of the conspiracy. Financial records, communication logs, and detailed plans for future operations were seized. But not everyone was captured. 3 members of the conspiracy, including the man who'd planted the device at Harold and Betty's house, remained at large. "We've got a problem," FBI agent Rodriguez told Michael. "The missing suspects have military training and access to explosives. They might try to carry out the Operation Clear-Cut plan as a final act." Michael studied the operational documents Rebecca had provided. They'd need to reach these 12 locations within a specific time window to create the fire complex they want. But they only have 3 people now. 3 people with enough explosives to spread across 100,000 acres. Jennifer coordinated with Forest Service and fire departments across the region. We've got every available resource monitoring the target areas, but it's a huge amount of territory to cover. Michael made a decision that surprised everyone. I want to be in the field. I know these forests better than anyone. I can predict where they'll try to start fires. Michael, you're supposed to be dead. And you're still recovering from injuries. That's exactly why I need to be out there. They won't expect me. And I know how they think. After intense debate, the FBI agreed to let Michael participate in the operation, but only as an advisor in a mobile command unit. As they drove through the forest, monitoring radio traffic and coordinating search teams, Michael felt the familiar mix of fear and adrenaline that came with fighting fires. But this time, he was trying to prevent fires before they started. At 2 p.m., they got their first break. A Forest Service lookout spotted suspicious activity at target location 7, 2 men carrying equipment through an area that was supposed to be empty. That's them, Michael said, studying the map. Location 7 is perfect for starting a fire that would spread to locations 8 and 9. They're trying to create a chain reaction. FBI tactical teams moved toward the location, but the suspects spotted them and fled deeper into the forest. A chase began through terrain that was already dry and dangerous. Michael watched the pursuit on tactical displays in the command vehicle. The suspects were moving toward a canyon that Michael knew well, a natural funnel that would accelerate any fire that started there. They're going to make their stand at Devil's Canyon, he told Agent Rodriguez. It's the perfect location for them. If they start a fire there, it'll be impossible to stop. Can we cut them off? There's an old fire road that comes in from the east. If we move fast, we can get there before them. Against protocol, Michael joined the tactical team heading for the canyon. His knowledge of the terrain was too valuable to leave behind. They reached the eastern approach, just as the suspects arrived at the canyon rim. Through binoculars, Michael could see them setting up what looked like a sophisticated incendiary system. They're not just starting a fire, he reported. They're creating a firestorm. That device will generate enough heat to create its own weather system. The FBI team prepared to move in, but Michael saw a problem. Wait, look at the wind. Direction. If we spook them and they trigger that device early, the fire will trap us in this canyon. So, what do you suggest? Michael thought back to his 23 years of fighting fires. Sometimes the best way to stop a fire was to remove its fuel source. We create a fire break. Cut off their fuel supply before they can start the main fire. It was a risky plan that required precise timing. While tactical teams moved into position, Michael helped coordinate a controlled burn operation to create a barrier between the suspect's location and the main forest. The controlled burn began at 3:45 p.m. Fire crews ignited a line of small fires along the eastern ridge, creating a fire break that would prevent any arson fire from spreading beyond the canyon. It was dangerous work. They were literally fighting fire with fire. Michael, we've got visual on the suspects, Agent Rodriguez reported through radio. They're setting up multiple devices. This isn't just about starting one fire. They're trying to create a coordinated explosion. Through his binoculars, Michael could see the truth of the situation. The suspects weren't just planning to start a forest fire. They were planning to create an environmental catastrophe that would destroy everything within a 50-mile radius. Agent Rodriguez, you need to understand something. Those devices aren't just incendiary. They're designed to create a crown fire, a fire that burns through the treetops. Once a crown fire starts in these conditions, it becomes a fire tornado. Nothing can stop it. How much time do we have? Michael studied the wind patterns and terrain, maybe 30 minutes before conditions become perfect for what they're planning. After that, even if we stop them, the environmental conditions will be too dangerous for any fire suppression. The tactical team began their approach, but the suspects were well positioned and heavily armed. Gunfire echoed through the canyon as FBI agents tried to advance. Michael made a decision that would define the rest of his life. I'm going in. Michael, you're not tactical. You're a firefighter. Exactly. And I know something they don't know about this canyon. Years earlier, during a training exercise, Michael had discovered a series of natural caves that connected different parts of the canyon. The entrance was hidden behind a waterfall that most people never noticed. He worked his way around to the waterfall, using his knowledge of the terrain to avoid detection. The cave system was treacherous. Narrow passages, unstable rocks, and the constant risk of getting lost. But it offered a way to approach the suspects from behind. As he moved through the caves, Michael could hear the gunfight above him. Time was running out. If the suspects triggered their devices while he was underground, he'd be trapped in a cave system that would become a furnace. He emerged from the caves about 50 yards behind the suspects' position. They were focused on the FBI team approaching from the front, unaware that anyone could approach from behind. Michael had no weapon except his firefighting equipment. But sometimes, the right tool for the right job wasn't a gun. He activated his water pack and moved silently toward the incendiary devices. If he could disable them before the suspects noticed him. But one of the men turned and spotted him. "It's DeSanta. He's supposed to be dead." Gunfire erupted, but Michael was already moving. He used his water spray to create a screen of mist while advancing toward the devices. His plan was simple. If he could soak the incendiary material, it wouldn't burn properly. "You should have stayed dead, hero," one suspect shouted, firing repeatedly. Michael felt a bullet graze his arm, but he kept moving. He reached the first device and emptied his water pack onto it, destroying the chemical mixture needed for ignition. But there were 3 more devices, and now all the suspects were focused on him. "Kill him! Kill him now!" Michael dove for cover, bolder as bullets chipped stone around him. He was pinned down, injured, and running out of options. Then he heard the sound that changed everything. Helicopters. Multiple aircraft approaching fast. "FBI! Drop your weapons immediately!" The suspects were now caught between the ground team and the air support. But instead of surrendering, they made a desperate choice. "If we can't burn the whole forest, we'll burn what we can." One suspect ran toward the remaining devices, apparently planning to trigger them manually. Michael knew that even a partial detonation would start a fire that could kill everyone in the canyon. Without thinking, Michael broke from cover and tackled the suspect just as he reached for the trigger. They went down hard on the rocky ground, fighting for control of the device. The suspect was younger and stronger, but Michael had something more powerful than strength. He had the desperate determination of someone who'd seen too much death and destruction. "You killed innocent people," Michael shouted as they struggled. "Families lost everything because of your greed." "It was business," the suspect gasped back. "Just business. Tell that to Harold and Betty. Tell that to all the people who died. In your business, fires." Michael managed to rip the detonator away from the suspect, just as FBI agents reached them. The man was taken into custody, and the remaining devices were safely disabled. 3 weeks later, Michael stood in a federal courtroom as prosecutors outlined the full scope of the conspiracy. The evidence was overwhelming. Financial records, communication logs, the recording device from that first night, and testimony from multiple witnesses. Colonel Patterson sat at the defendant's table, no longer the confident emergency management director. His military bearing had crumbled under the weight of the evidence against him. Beside him, David Walsh stared at his hands, occasionally glancing at his sister Rebecca in the gallery. The defendants orchestrated a conspiracy that resulted in the deaths of at least 37 people over a 5-year period, the prosecutor stated. They used their positions of public trust to coordinate arson attacks for personal financial gain. Michael's testimony was the centerpiece of the prosecution's case. He described every detail of that night, from the suspicious fire patterns to his encounter with the arsonist at Harold and Betty's house, to Patterson's confession during the manhunt. "Mr. DeSanta," the defense attorney said during cross-examination, "you admit that you suffered significant trauma during these events. Isn't it possible that stress and injury affected your memory?" Michael looked directly at Patterson. "I have 23 years of experience fighting fires. I know the difference between natural fire patterns and deliberate arson. I know the difference between accident and murder." Harold testified from a wheelchair, his leg still healing from that night. Betty, now recovered, provided clear and detailed testimony about the arsonist who'd entered their home. "He wasn't there to rescue us," she said firmly. He was there to kill us. The financial evidence was devastating. Investigators had traced millions of dollars in illegal transactions, showing how the conspiracy members had profited from properties destroyed in their engineered fires. Rebecca Walsh's testimony was perhaps the most damaging. She described finding her brother's documents and realizing the scope of what they were planning. "When I saw Operation Clear Cut," she said, tears streaming down her face, "I knew David had become something our father would have been ashamed of. Dad died fighting fires. David was starting them." The trial lasted 6 weeks. When the verdict came back, all major defendants were found guilty on multiple counts, including conspiracy, arson, murder, and racketeering. Patterson received life in prison without parole. Walsh received 40 years. The other co-conspirators received sentences ranging from 15 to 30 years. But for Michael, the legal victory felt hollow. Too many people had died. Too many families had been destroyed. 6 months after the trial, Michael stood in front of a room full of firefighter recruits at the California Fire Academy. His official retirement had been quietly rescinded, and he'd been offered a position training the next generation of firefighters. "Fighting fires isn't just about water and foam," he told the young men and women. "It's about understanding that every fire tells a story. Your job is to read that story correctly." One recruit raised her hand. "What if the story doesn't make sense?" Michael smiled, thinking back to that night in the forest. "Then you keep investigating until it does, because sometimes the most important fires are the ones that aren't supposed to happen." After class, Michael drove to the cemetery where many fire victims were buried. He visited the grave of Martha Henderson, an elderly woman who died in the shopping center fire that was actually one of Patterson's early operations. "We got them, Martha," he said quietly. "It took longer than it should have, but we got them." His phone buzzed with a text message from Harold. The old man had made a full recovery and was now volunteering with a fire safety education program. "Betty and I are speaking to a community group next week about fire preparedness. Want to join us? These people should hear from the man who saved their forest." Michael smiled and typed back, "I'll be there." As he drove home, Michael thought about the recording device that had started everything. The technology that preserved his voice when everyone thought he was dead had become a symbol of truth surviving even when everything seemed lost. He'd started carrying a new recording device, upgraded with better technology, not because he expected to encounter another conspiracy, but because the truth was always worth preserving. The Redwood National Forest was healing. New growth was emerging from the burned areas, and wildlife was returning. Nature had an incredible ability to recover from disaster, given time and protection. Michael's phone rang as he pulled into his driveway. It was Jennifer Chen. "Michael, I wanted to let you know, the insurance companies are finally releasing settlements to all the victims of Patterson's fires. The families are getting the money they deserve." "That's good news. There's something else. The governor wants to create a new position, State Fire Investigation Coordinator, someone who can work across jurisdictions to identify suspicious fire patterns." Interested, Michael looked at his house, thinking about retirement papers he'd never submitted. At 55, he could easily step away from active duty. He'd earned that right, but he also thought about all the fires that might still be out there, waiting to be understood. All the stories that needed to be read correctly. "Send me the details," he said. Sarah Mitchell paused on the hiking trail, checking her GPS coordinates. She was 3 miles into the Redwood National Forest, following a trail that hadn't been maintained in years. As a freelance outdoor blogger, she was always looking for hidden gems to write about. The forest here showed signs of old fire damage, charred stumps, and younger tree growth indicating a major burn sometime in the past. But nature was reclaiming the area beautifully. She noticed something unusual under a fallen log that had obviously been there for years. Partially buried in leaves and debris was what looked like a firefighter's emergency kit. Sarah carefully extracted the kit, noting that it was in remarkably good condition despite obvious exposure to weather. The name tag read, M. de Santa, Riverside Fire Depth. Inside the kit, wrapped in multiple layers of waterproof material, was a small recording device. Curious, Sarah checked the device and found it still had battery power. She pressed the play button. This is Michael DeSanta. Badge 4419, August 15th, 2016, approximately 3:30 p.m. I've just encountered a man at 1247 Mountain View Road who admitted to setting the Redwood Fire. He indicated this was part of a larger operation, possibly involving County Planning Department. The fire was not accidental. Multiple incendiary devices being used. If something happens to me, this recording should go to State Fire Marshal's office. Sarah sat back, stunned. She'd stumbled upon what sounded like evidence from a major crime. But the recording was from 2016. Surely whatever case this related to had been resolved years ago. She pulled out her phone and searched for Michael DeSanta Redwood Fire 2016. The search results told an incredible story. A decorated firefighter who'd uncovered a massive arson conspiracy, been presumed dead, and ultimately brought down a criminal organization that had killed dozens of people and stolen millions of dollars. But according to the articles, Michael DeSanta was very much alive. He was now California's State Fire Investigation Coordinator, a position created specifically for him after his heroic actions. Sarah looked at the recording device in her hands, then at the forest around her. This must be the backup recording he'd hidden, insurance in case the original evidence was destroyed. She scrolled through the news articles, finding a recent one about Michael DeSanta receiving a commendation for his work investigating suspicious fires across the state. The article included his office phone number. Sarah made the call. State Fire Investigation. This is Coordinator DeSanta. Mr. DeSanta, my name is Sarah Mitchell. I'm hiking in the Redwood National Forest, and I think I just found something. That belongs to you. Michael listened as Sarah described finding the emergency kit and hearing the recording. After a moment of silence, he spoke. Sarah, you've just found a piece of history. That recording device was my insurance policy from the night that changed everything. I never went back to look for it because I didn't think it survived. What should I do with it? Keep it safe. That recording is evidence in a case that's still making its way through the appeals process. And Sarah, thank you. Even 8 years later, the truth is still worth preserving. As Sarah carefully repacked the recording device, she realized she'd stumbled upon more than just an interesting story for her blog. She'd found proof that sometimes, even when everything seems lost, the truth finds a way to survive. She marked the GPS coordinates where she'd found the kit and began hiking back toward her car. Behind her, the Redwood Forest continued its slow but steady recovery, growing stronger over the scars of the past. And somewhere in Sacramento, Michael DeSanta smiled as he hung up the phone. Even now, the forest was still giving up its secrets. Some stories, he reflected, were worth waiting 8 years to finish telling. The recording device that had saved his life, exposed a conspiracy, and brought justice to dozens of victims was, finally, coming home. In a career full of important saves, this might have been the most important one of all. Because sometimes the most crucial thing a firefighter can do isn't fight a fire. It's make sure the truth about how it started never burns away.